focusing on the Void Rays as they should. So that's a good move by Sluggy. And a bad move by Yrael, not controlling his zealots, letting them die. Looks like Sluggy was worried about his drones getting killed, so he fled all of them. However, they never really were under fire, so he did lose a lot of mining time there. Resource-wise, both players at least staying under 1,000, although we see Sluggy and Yrael approaching 1,000 gas. So when you start getting too much minerals or too much gas, especially too much gas, you need to consider changing your unit composition just to spend your money. And for Sluggy, that would be getting Mutalisks or Infestors, which both would be okay. Infestors primarily would be great. Now here we see Sluggy just going in with a very small number of speedlings, and this is why, as a Protoss or anyone against Zerg, you cannot have these naked expansions. Yrael might be used to games where players just don't do a good job of scouting, so he tries to go for that secret base. But once you get into the higher levels of skill, the old secret base strategy is usually a losing strategy. So we can see this is the second big mistake from Yrael. The first was not fleeing that initial attack with his like 2 or 3 Void Rays. Lost his entire army there. So he's been playing catch up since, and here he loses all his probes to just 5 Zerglings. And great job by Sluggy for just having that band of Zerglings roam the map. I mean, such a low investment just to get a very small number of Zerglings. A lot of people just scout with maybe one unit, like one Zergling. But if that one Zergling finds something like an expansion, it's just not going to be able to do much to it. So what you want to do sometimes is scout with just a little bit larger group. If they do find something undefended, like that base, they're going to be able to kill a lot of stuff before anything gets there. At like the platinum and the diamond level, a lot of players will just leave their entire army in one group, and we can see that Zergling attack, just a small band, was just very effective. Okay, so here we see the Hydras trying to fend off this mixed army, and this kind of illustrates the power of this Protoss build. You know, what's Sluggy going to do? Is he going to focus on the Void Ray? He probably should, since they're the heavy damage dealers. But at the same time, you're not going to kill the Stalkers and the Zealots. And the thing about this Void Ray mix is that it influences. Oh, here we see Sluggy losing 2 very expensive Overseers. However, he has a ton of gas. So the thing about the Void Rays is they force the Zerg's hand in terms of army composition. He can't spend too much on Roaches or Zerglings, and he's forced to spend the majority of his cash on anti-air units just because of the threat of Void Rays, just because they're so scary for a Zerg player. I think every Zerg player has lost a game where 2 or 3 Void Rays come in and just snipe your hatchery in like 7 seconds. So, but we do see Sluggy starting to mix up his forces with Roaches, which is very key here. I think he realizes that it's not an all-out Void Ray strategy by Yrael, so he's trying to mix it up a little bit better. Still, only 2 Roaches and 13 Hydras. So, not very many units for Sluggy. However, as I mentioned earlier, with the low APM that Yrael has, We can see he's slipped on his macro and he's reached to 700 minerals and 1800 gas. And if you thought 1000 gas was bad at this point in the game, then 1800 is ridiculous. He could have several High Templar with Psi Storm by now. You know, he could have pursued another tech tree. He could have Void Ray and High Templar, or he simply just could have tried to mine more minerals. What we see that his minerals are gone, so that's another example of just bad macro where he could have expanded earlier, but he didn't. Sure, he did get this base, but it just wasn't sufficient. He didn't, you know, he left it without defense. Yeah, even if that hadn't been killed, he'd still have way too much gas. Okay, these zealots caught out in the open. I don't know where he was headed with those. Maybe he saw this and was just going to try to kill it. And we see Yrael's macro is really hurting him at this point. He's just got the 5 Void Ray, 9 Zealots, and 2 Stalkers. So, whereas Sluggy is starting to pump the units pretty good now. Still kind of low, and still too much gas, but he is doing a better macro job than Yrael. Okay, so here Yrael is desperate to save his base, so he must defend with everything or he loses. And once again, Sluggy, if he hadn't have added these roaches, he definitely would just have lost everything to the Zealots and the Stalkers, just beating up on the Hydras. But he was able to add a few roaches, and I would say that was the key to at least getting Yrael down to this very small amount of forces. And as a good macro player does, he's already producing more units. If we look back at his base, he's got some more Hydras coming. This far into the game, it definitely would have been worth it for, especially considering how much gas Sluggy has, to start on those upgrades much, much sooner. At this point, he's not even attempting it. And I suppose this little mistake here by Sluggy was caused by an attack where he fled some drones. And I guess he forgot to send him back to mining. Oh, but here they go. Running for safety. Very low economy game here. We can see that just tiny numbers of Void Rays are not that scary. Yeah. The whole power to the Void Ray attack, you know, with when you're either mixing them with ground forces or when you're just using them by themselves for attacks, is you've got to flee the Void Rays when you have small numbers. You just can't lose those first 3-4 Void Rays. And now we have a pretty tough force against the small number of Void Rays that are going to come out of that single Stargate. That's another thing that Yrael could have done this entire game, is just plop down more Stargates. This is a great example of how this is the kind of thing that will limit your game, having bad macro like this. Doesn't matter if you watch all the commentaries in the world or all the pro replays in the world. You need to get your mechanics down, your macro mechanics down, and just spend that money on something. So really nothing's gonna stop this army by Sluggy, because he just doesn't have enough production buildings, even though he's got a lot of money, you know, 2,800 gas. It's ridiculous. Sluggy at least is spending his minerals, so not the awesomest macro by the Zerg, but we see here the better macro player wins the game. And Sluggy had the better macro. So another thing we see is if you're a bad macro player and your 10-minute or 12-minute initial attack fails, a lot of those players just really struggle and just absolutely cannot win against a better macro player once the game goes past that 10-minute mark. So this was another battle report from Johnny Vegas. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next time.